So today I want to talk about 6 changes that I recently made in my freediving training in order to dive deeper. And it's really helping to take my freediving to a whole nother level. It's also improved my flow state on my dives, and I'm enjoying my deep dives and even some dry trainings in ways that I would have never imagined. But first, the intro. Hello and welcome to episode 6 of the Freediving podcast, your source for information about training for freediving, not only so you can freedive better, but so you can live the most healthy and epic life possible. I am your host, Renee Blendon. I'm a competitive freediver and a freediver instructor trainer living in Dahab. And this podcast represents the efforts of my own personal research and my trial and error from my freediving training, as well as the combined efforts of a public open source information network, which I invite you to join on Facebook at facebook.com/groups/freediving podcast. All are welcome. So I just want to start by talking about some changes I'll be making on the podcast. So far, the Freediving podcast has been just amazing. I've certainly been learning a lot myself just in the process of researching and preparing all of the podcast episodes. And I'm really enjoying sharing some of these awesome things I'm learning about and discovering about freediving with everyone out there listening. And I've also been getting some really great feedback on the podcast, which is awesome, especially because it's so new and it's so nice to know that people are listening and finding value in what I'm saying. So I've been putting up these pretty extensive 30 to 45 minute podcast episodes, which obviously takes quite a bit of time to research and prepare. And so what I'd really like to do is get episodes up faster and more frequently, ideally like once a week, and if not, even a couple of times a week. So my new game plan is to record shorter episodes, anywhere from 5 to 20 minutes long, which I can just do on my break time in between my freediving training and my workday. And basically, I'm just going to dump some ideas about freediving training on you. And that way, while you guys are in the hustle and bustle of your everyday life, you can listen to the episodes easier and more regularly, either when you're on your way to work in the morning or just in between things, and get some quick ideas and inspiration for your freediving training. So, I'll still be putting out the longer, extensive episodes, and we'll continue the Inside the Mind of the World's Top Freedivers series. But these longer, more extensive episodes will go out, say, like once a month or every other month, just whenever I can find time to sit down and work on them. So that's the new game plan. Very exciting. So let's dive right into today's topic. Like I said in the very beginning, today I want to talk about 6 changes that I recently made in my freediving training in order to dive deeper, and also to resolve some issues that I had with hypoxia and chest pressure. So last month I hired a remote freediving coach, which I'll tell you all about shortly. And basically, he created a training plan and recommended I change several things in my freediving. And I'm not sure yet if these things are definitely going to work because it's still a bit early in the process. It's only week 3, but I think it'll work in the long term because it's already improving my freediving in all sorts of ways, from a dive response standpoint, from a flexibility standpoint, apnea standpoint, and just how I'm approaching 70-meter depths more easily and with less hypoxia. And so how do you improve all those different things at once without accidentally overtraining? It's kind of this mix. What's the perfect formula for that particular freediver, for their particular goals, which the fact of having a coach really, really helps. So anyway, I'm thinking that maybe some of these things can help other freedivers too, who are also training in depth, especially those freedivers who are battling with hypoxia, like LMCs or blackouts on the surface, or freedivers who feel pressure on the chest, either before, during, or after their dives, or even freedivers out there who just feel like they've kind of plateaued in their training and they're just feeling really stuck at a particular depth. So I battled with all those things as well, and so that's why I started working with a coach. And the training he's having me do has been super interesting for me and super helpful. So hopefully it'll be helpful for you guys too. So the coach that I'm working with, some of you may know him. His name is Dagoury Florian, also known as Flo. He's from France, but currently living in Thailand. And the reason why I hired Flo to coach me is that I've been training in free immersion pretty avidly since May, just really slowly and gradually building up my depth again and my flexibility again after like 8 months of bodybuilding. Yes, I know, that's crazy. But long story short, in November, I started to have LMCs on the surface after my deep free immersion dives, dives that were in the 67 to 72 meter range. And sometimes the LMCs were very, very minor. Like my buddy couldn't even see any visible shaking or anything, but I felt like inside that I was shaking. I felt very hypoxic. It was actually pretty weird. And so I continued to go deeper, but then when I was freediving in that 70 to 72 meter range, the LMCs became quite obvious with, hands shaking and head shaking and some trouble doing the recovery breaths. So obviously I couldn't keep going deeper as much as I wanted to. And even though my equalization was good and everything else was good, because I just wasn't coming up fresh on the surface. And I definitely didn't want to have a blackout or anything like that. I wanted to do dives where I was super fresh on the surface. And so what I did was first I tried to fix the problem myself. Like I said, I knew it wasn't an issue with equalization or also technique, because I've trained in free immersion for the last 4 or 5 years. So I know my technique is pretty fine by now. And I know it's not because of overtraining, because I also have overtrained in the past, so I know when that's the case. So basically I came to the conclusion that it's just my breath hold. My breath hold just isn't long enough for some of these dives that I want to do, and basically I'm at my limit there. So in order to increase my breath hold time, I began doing a lot of trainings where I did just slow free immersion dives, maybe 4 or 5 in a session to around 40 meters, like really, really super slow motion. And I do 2 or 3 of these sessions every week. I also began doing some pool training in free immersion, hoping that would also help improve my breath hold time. But even though these were pretty proper trainings, they still didn't resolve the hypoxia issue on the deep dives. I was still having LMCs on the surface whenever I dived over like roughly 70 meters. So yeah, after some weeks of this, it just kind of felt like I was banging my head against the wall. And so I hired Flo to coach me. And I've known Flo for about 5 years now and wanted to work with him because for one, he's super experienced and very knowledgeable about freediving training and all the science behind it. Just check out his Instagram posts at mr.10minutes and you'll see all his great posts. Also, He's a super generous person, always helping people. And I remember when he was in Dahab and we were training together, he was always super helpful in coaching me, didn't even charge me a cent. So I knew he was the kind of coach that would really do everything he can to help me. So anyway, we had an initial call, and I think it was like 2 hours long, and he asked me all these questions. How was I breathing before the dive? What was the experience like going down on the dive? How did it feel on the bottom? How did it feel coming up? How deep did I dive on RV, FRC? What warm-ups did I do? You name it. He asked every question in the world. And then based on everything that I told him and all the data from my dives, he said that the problem wasn't actually my breath hold time. My breath hold was actually good enough for the depths that I want to do. The problem is more likely my dive response, which the dive response just isn't strong enough on my deep dives. And also that I needed to improve the flexibility in the chest and lungs, more specifically the baroreceptors in the lungs, which deal with pressure. So in order for me to go deeper and solve the hypoxia issue on the surface, we had to make basically 6 changes in order to strengthen my dive response on my deep dive and improve my flexibility in my chest and lungs. So the first change we made was to change my warm-up dives to decrease the number of warm-ups I was doing and the intensity of the warm-ups. So at the time, I was doing 2 to 3 hangs around 25 to 30 meters deep. And so they were quite long dives and also kind of deep for warm-up dives. So the problem with doing this many warm-ups and this type of warm-ups is that every warm-up dive that you do before your deep dive basically dulls down your dive response more and more. So this means that when you go to do your deep dive, on that dive, you're going to have a higher heart rate than usual. So Flo actually said that my heart rate was probably actually going up during my free fall rather than down. And probably also on the ascent, it was increasing. So that's not good because it means more oxygen consumption. Also, because of a weakened dive response, now you also get a weaker blood shift, causing more stress on the baroreceptors in the lungs and the feeling of pressure on the chest. And among other things too, for example, the spleen effect. Your spleen isn't going to release as many red blood cells, so you're also going to have less oxygen bioavailable. So if you're doing a deep dive with a weakened blood shift, this basically means you're going to have higher O2 consumption because of the higher heart rate, and you're going to have less oxygen available for your heart, lungs, and brain due to the lack of blood shift and the lack of red blood cells from the spleen. So this means hypoxia on the surface. And if you add stressed baroreceptors and chest pressure and obviously some stress coming up, if you add that to the equation, this makes the hypoxia situation even worse on the surface. So we ended up changing my warm-up dives from the dives I was doing to just one hang at 10 meters and holding until the first contraction plus 60 seconds and then going up at normal speed. And then because I was still feeling a little bit of chest pressure on my chest after some of my deep dives, we changed the one warm-up hang to 2 FRC dives to around 20 meters. So not hanging at all, just like down and up. And this I really like, and this is what I'm currently doing. So let me just add now that those 2 or 3 hangs that I was doing initially for warm-ups, these were working for me really well for a long time, for, I don't know, like the last 4 or 5 years. But now, because I'm looking to go beyond 70 meters, now I have to change these things because without a strong enough blood shift, I risk being too hypoxic on the surface and I risk having an injury. So point is, you don't have to change your warm-ups at all probably, unless you're looking to dive deeper than 60, 70 meters. It really just depends on the person and what you're doing and what your goals are. So that's why it's really great to have a coach to help you figure out all this stuff. So another change that Flo had me do is to do more RV and FRC training sessions in order to improve the flexibility in my lungs. Basically, the depth that I was diving to on RV and FRC wasn't deep enough relative to the depth that I was going to on full lungs. So I was diving to around 70 meters on full lungs, but on FRC, I was only going to maybe 28 meters, and on RV, I think I was going to around 16 meters. So for a 70 meter dive or more, I should be able to do an RV dive to 20 meters on dive 1, and for FRC, 40 meters on dive 1 or 2. And so to do a 20 meter RV dive and a 40 meter FRC dive on just dive 1, that's obviously not going to happen overnight. And so it's probably going to take a few months to build that up. So that's why we better start the process now. And so Flo had me integrate anywhere from 1 to 4 RV or FRC training sessions into my weekly program. The amount of sessions of these that I did per week just depended on which phase we were in. So for example, in week 1, it was a lot of volume. So I was doing 2 sessions of 10 RV dives and also 2 sessions of 10 FRC dives. This is not including warm-ups. So that was for week 1, and then in week 2 and 3, it was cut back to just 1 FRC training session with 6 deep FRCs. And I'm doing other trainings as well, but as far as FRC and RV, that's it for the moment. And so I'm not going to go over all the nitty-gritty details about the RV and FRC trainings. Maybe I will cover these in another podcast episode. I'm just trying to keep this episode as short as possible. Okay, so besides changing the warm-ups and adding in some more FRC and RV trainings, Flo also had me change my breathe up. So this was probably one of the biggest changes, and so it took a bit of getting used to. At the time, I was doing my breathe up through the snorkel, and for the relaxation breathing, I was doing like an inhale, hold at the top for a few seconds, passive exhale, full exhale, hold at the bottom for a few seconds, passive inhale, full inhale, hold at the top for a few seconds, passive exhale, full exhale, hold at the bottom for a few seconds, and continue in that way for a couple of minutes. So that was my relaxation breathing I was doing. And then I would take 2 or 3 final breaths, hold the last breath, and go down on my dive. So my breathe up wasn't always exactly like that. Sometimes I do less on the relaxation breathing, more on the final breaths. Sometimes I do like a mix and go back and forth between the two. Anyway, the problem with that breathe up that I was doing was there wasn't much consistency. So I do it slightly different, like every day, starting my deep dive with a different amount of CO2 every time, basically. And also, between the relaxation breathing and the final breaths, I was basically over breathing. So my CO2 was starting super low on the deep dive, which was also causing that lack of dive response, meaning higher heart rate, less blood shift, and therefore leading to hypoxia issues on the surface. So Flo said that this breathe up that I was doing before is fine if you're diving like 65 meters or shallower, but if you want to dive deeper than 70, now you need a super strong dive response, which means I've got to change my breathing before the dive. And so this new breathe up would make it so that I start the dive with a neutral amount of CO2 in the body, which of course it's going to be higher than what I'm used to diving with. So I'm gonna feel less relaxed on my deep dives than normal, but it's just something I would eventually get used to. So by going with just a neutral amount of CO2 on the dives would make it so that dive response kicks in faster and stronger. And also this new breathing style would be more precise, so that I always start my deep dives with more or less the same amount of CO2. So for the new breathe up, he had me do first arriving on the buoy and doing 5 minutes of facial immersion. So just inhaling through the snorkel and exhaling out the nose. So exhaling the bubbles onto the eyes and really trying to relax. Then after 5 minutes of facial immersion, 3 minutes of just regular, ordinary tidal breathing. So just breathing very naturally, can be belly breathing or intercostal breathing, and just sipping in the air and sipping out the air. So it would look like this kind of. So if you're doing it correctly, no one should be able to see or hear your breathing from the outside, so it's really hard to show on the camera. But anyway, just know that it's just really relaxed tidal breathing, and then this will bring your heart rate lower because you are breathing less, but it's not allowing your CO2 to drop a whole lot, and it's not increasing your CO2. The aim is to start the dive with a neutral amount of CO2, like I said. So after 3 minutes of that, then do 1 purge breath. So just a full deep inhale, and then an active gentle exhale. So you want to exhale deeper than FRC, but not as deep as RV. And this purge breath is just so you can start the dive fresh. And then the final breath. So final full breath, add 5 packs, and then start your dive. So just to recap, it was 5 minutes facial immersion breathing, then 3 minutes just regular tidal breathing, then the purge breath, the final breath, 5 packs, and down you go. So like I said, this breathe up is really good if you want to start your dive with a neutral amount of CO2 in the body, and so that way you have a stronger dive response on your dive. So now I do this breathe up on every dive. Like I said, it took maybe a week or so to get used to it, but now I'm pretty used to it, and now I'm arriving on the surface super fresh and without any hypoxia at all. So it does work pretty well. Okay, so change number 4. What we did is changed my morning preparation. So this way it includes more specific chest and lung stretching before the dive session. So before I was doing basically 20 minutes of just general full body stretching, and then some lung stretching on full lungs and Uddiyana Bandha. And so the new preparation is we changed it to 6 Uddiyana Bandhas, laying face up on the bridge. And then after that, 5 minutes laying on top of a foam roller on the chest, so it pressing into my sternum. This is to help with that pressure adaptation. And then I also do some full body stretching as well, just to feel a bit more loose and relaxed before diving. So that was change 4, the morning preparation. Change number 5 is probably my favorite change. Flo added some variable weight diving in the training plan. And this way I can build up my depth in variable weight and eventually do my target depth in that before doing it in free immersion. So on week 1 of the plan, it was just 1 variable weight session per week. And then in week 2 and 3, he upped it to 2 variable weight sessions per week. And I am just really loving the variable weight dives. It's so nice to just like cruise down to depth, and it's super fun, super relaxing. And then arriving at the bottom, super deep in the water, with all the oxygen in the world, feeling like you can stay down there forever, and then just slowly making my way back up in just total bliss. So really loving that. It's really like heaven. And then change number 6, the last change. This element of training that Flo put into the plan is apnea walking. So doing apnea walking 3 times per week in the evening. The first week was doing apnea walking CO2 table. So basically hold the breath and then walking 100 meters or steps, then stop, hold the breath then stop and recover for 2 minutes, then walk another 100 meters and then recover for 130, then walk another 100 meters and then recover for 1 minute, 100 meters, then another again, 1 minute, 100 meters, 1 minute, 100 meters, 1 minute. So it's 4 1 minutes, and then 45-second recovery, and then 30-second recovery. So I can put this on the podcast page so you can see the table. Anyway, so that was week 1, doing that 3 times a week in the night. And then week 2 and 3, we changed it to week 2, we changed it to 75 meters instead of walking 100 meters because the 100 meters was a bit intense and it was hard to do without hyperventilating. And then week 3, we changed the apnea walking to doing 5 apnea walks. So you start with tidal breathing, just a few minutes, and then hold the breath on full lungs for 25 seconds. Then exhale to FRC. And then walk the maximum distance. So doing that 5 times. And the goal being an 80-meter walk. Yeah, really enjoying the evening apnea walking because it's a pretty short training session. Maybe it only takes like 15-20 minutes. And actually I can just do it right inside my house. I don't have to go outside. So I just walk circles around in my office. So it works out really well because it's super convenient and it's a really proper training. So those 6 things are the main changes that I made recently in my freediving training, which were recommended by Flo, my amazing coach, so that I could freedive more easily in that 70 to 80 meter range. And so we can fix the hypoxia LMC issue that I was having on the surface. And of course, there were other changes as well, like breathing gymnastics, doing that 4 times a week, reverse packing exercises, doing deep hangs, like 20-second hangs at 50 to 60 meters, just to work on mental and pressure adaptation and relaxation. Also made some additions to my food and supplements, and other things like that. But those 6 things that I covered in this podcast episode were like the main changes. And the good news is it's been working out amazingly so far. I've already adapted to the new warm-ups and the breathe up, and I'm feeling pretty relaxed on my deep dives. I haven't had an LMC once since starting the program, so that's really great. And like I said, I'm really loving the variable weight diving. Just the other day I did a 70-meter variable weight dive, and it was just so effortless and so amazing. And so, yeah, it's going really well, and it's been really awesome working with Flo. He's an excellent coach, and I highly recommend him. Feel free to find him online just by searching for his school. It's called Freedive, Flo, and Olga. And so anyway, this all got me thinking about how important it is to have an open mind to changing your training as you approach new depths. I mean, some of the things that I was doing in my freediving training, like my stretching, my warm-ups, my preparations, my in-water trainings, a lot of these things I was doing almost in the same way for years. And of course I adapted them and improved them, but they really didn't like change that much over the years, just small tweaks here and there. So then I just keep hitting this wall in that 70 to 75 meter range, which was so incredibly frustrating. So I knew I must be doing something wrong, and for sure I had to change something, but what I didn't really know exactly. So that's why it's great to have a coach, even if it's a remote coach, just to help plan your training properly and to give you solutions and ideas for training that you may never realize just on your own. So anyway, I just wanted to throw that out there. Not so much to tell you what to do, but just to get the wheels in your head spinning, is how you can approach new depths with an open mind so you can train better, so you can save time and improve your freediving exponentially. So those are some things for you guys to think about today. I'm going to do some computer work now, so I'm going to end this recording. I hope you guys enjoyed this. If this is your first time listening, please subscribe and feel free to check out the podcast page on my website at reneeblunden.com/podcast. And don't forget to join the Facebook group as well. I just started doing Facebook Lives in the group, where we all do dry freediving trainings together. So definitely join the group, even if you're not able to freedive at the moment, because we can all do some dry trainings at home all together. So you can find the group at facebook.com/groups/freediving podcast. Appreciate you guys, and we'll talk to you again soon. Have a great day.